Hey everybody, Ty here. Hope everyone's doing well. So before I get into this one, I will say we fell way behind due to severe weather here and also some personal matters. But June outlook is coming, and we're gonna kind of go week to week on this one. Today we're doing the first outlook, and then we'll get the final outlook next week. So, like I said, we're gonna have plenty of content coming up for the month ahead here. So this, of course, is the first look. So as I said before, not much is going to be etched in stone, so to speak. But I think we're going to see something pretty consistent to what we're seeing with this current outlook, which is the first one. The second one shouldn't be too dissimilar, I don't think. Maybe a little bit of a shift out towards the west for these above average temperature probabilities. As far as the above average chances as a whole, I think they'll mostly remain the same. I don't expect to see any below average areas like what you're seeing over here off to the right part of the screen. I think we're mainly going to be focused on our above average temperatures across the board. Are some areas where we'll see equal chances. Those are mainly confined over towards the Great Lakes in the far northeast. I expect that to pretty much remain the same, and then the same can be said for Alaska, especially towards the northern and central parts of the state there. Things to make note of here, of course, with the temp outlook is, of course, over towards the southwest. Not surprising to see it a little bit warm over here. It's also going to be drier over here. We usually get a lot of ridging during this time of the year, and I would expect this to continue to be the case over here towards this region. An area that particularly interests me, and this is going to be kind of backed up by the precip outlook that we're going to look at momentarily here. It's the fact that we're seeing, while we're still seeing above average probabilities, the probabilities themselves are on the lower end of the spectrum, the 33 to 40%. I've seen a lot of years, especially these last couple of years, where we're in the 40 to 50 percentile and above pretty easily, and it gets even into the mid Atlantic parts of the Northeast. This will not be the case this time around, and that's in large part due to the Enso pattern that we're in. We're in a neutral Enso. We're actually starting to shift a little bit into the positive phase here, so some slight changes compared to what we're used to dealing with here, but nonetheless, I would say that anything that we're seeing pretty much from this point out to say we're going to be just slightly above that 0 degrees Celsius line. And a reminder, anything that's above zero point 0.5 degrees Celsius in the positive mode is considered an El Nino phase. Anything that's at the negative zero point 0.5 degrees Celsius is the La Nina phase. So last year we were in a weak La Nina. Then the year prior, I think we were in a strong El Nino. I actually might have that mixed up. We'll look at that a little bit later to verify it. So if I have it wrong, feel free to laugh at me. Just drop a laugh emoji in the comments. But in any case, though, pretty much for the rest of the year, we're expected to remain in a neutral Enso here. So usually with this, we'll have sometimes we'll have stronger wind shear depending on the area that we're referring to. When it comes to severe weather, La Nina usually is a more active season when it comes to tornadoes. El Nino kind of results in more wind shear over towards the Atlantic. Also results in usually less hurricanes. So the neutral phase, we're kind of right in the middle. So with this also being the start of hurricane season, that's a pretty good detail to remember. So with that in mind, we'll be, of course, looking at the Gulf and also looking at our oscillations as a whole here. There's going to be a big wild card as we get into the very end of this month and the start of this month. We see two areas of low pressure over here in two particular points, oscillations as they're called. We have one over here towards the Arctic here. This is the Arctic oscillation, and then the North Atlantic oscillation, which is over here towards Greenland. That's going to allow some cold air to sneak in past the eastern parts of the Mississippi and beyond. So we're going to see some below average temperatures over here as a whole, and a little bit of increased activity with our weather pattern as we get into the very beginning of the month. By the time we get towards the 7th, this is going to clear out. And from that point on, we're going to kind of level off a little bit with our temperatures. They're not going to be excessively hot or excessively cold here either. So June may be an average month, maybe slightly above average for some, unless, of course, as I mentioned before, you're out towards the west, especially the southwest. Another area that I'm keeping note of over here, too, is you see this little clear slot right here. This isn't showing high or low pressure over here. It's just a clear area. I do think that this could be a point of interest maybe for severe weather. This is an early signal possibly at best. But even then, we're so far out of range at this point, being 3 weeks out, that I can't even really latch onto it at this point. So a lot more data that I'm gonna have to consume before I even really say that, hey, this is making my radar, or really anyone else's for that matter. But this is something that we should be paying a little bit closer attention to, and I definitely will be doing that going forward. Then after that point, further ridging kind of builds here. If you look at these contour lines, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about. As you see that little arch kind of pushing upward more. That's high pressure here, so no real big concerns there. See a little bit more activity towards maybe the northwest by the time we get towards the very end of the month. So like I said, kind of all over the place with the pattern here, but for the most part, we're staying relatively consistent with the high pressure being dominant over the northern states. And then a little bit of troughing seemed to be a little bit more persistent over towards the east as we go forward. Now, how this reflects our temperatures, here's what I was talking about as we head into next week. This is where we're well below average towards a lot of places here. We could even be 15 to even 20 degrees below average here in these areas in the purple, where we're seeing those above average temperatures mainly hanging out towards the west. That's going to be pretty much a constant throughout the month. Now, as we get into that first week of June, you can see we kind of level off a little bit. And we mostly will end up staying that way throughout the course of the month based off the 7-day map here. Again, as I mentioned before, since we're so far out of range, we can't see what every day is going to be like right now. And even then, trying to look 30 days in advance is almost like a pitfall in a way, as I like to describe it. It's kind of hard to really get a good read on what's going to happen here. But all the way up until the first week of July, it doesn't look all that bad. I mean, still going to have plenty of warm days or maybe a few hot ones sprinkled in, but for the most part, not looking too terrible. Of course, if you're going to be outside for excessive periods of time, since we know it's summer, you definitely want to make sure that you're staying properly hydrated, take breaks as needed, step inside, get some AC, whatever you need to do. But for the most part, though, I would say it might not be as hot as what we've been dealing with. I'll say that much. Last few summers have been pretty brutal depending on where you are. So let's go ahead and switch over to our precip map here. And this is where my interest kind of has been piqued a little bit more. So if we were to go ahead and look at next week in particular, very active over here towards the Ozarks and over towards the southeast as well. We kind of level off as we get into next week, and then look at how we start to see this increase of moisture towards the Atlantic and Gulf Coast here. I am keeping in mind that towards the middle of the month, this is June by the way, hurricane season starts June 1st. It's not uncommon that we can get some low pressure centers to form over the Gulf off the edge of these frontal boundaries that we can get. So with that in mind, I'm keeping an extra close eye on seeing if we can't get a sneaky little tropical depression to form right here. And I'll go into more detail as to why I'm interested in that possibility as we go forward here, as I show you guys the rest of the outlook here. But I'm seeing a constant here, and that is the increased probability of accumulated precip over towards the deep south here, right off the Gulf Coast. And the reason I'm interested in this, and we're basically looking at the same map as we were here, but we're putting increased focus over the lower 48. What I want you to pay attention to, especially as we get towards the middle part of the month, look at how we don't have much in the way of troughing here. And we kind of have this little clear slot for our pressure, almost like a small little pressure gradient that pops up here. But it's a very wide area. So with this, I would expect wind shear to be a little bit lower over here. And we'll get into more details in the next video that we do, which is going to be about the hurricane season outlook. But with these waters being slightly above average and a lack of wind shear, which is what you need for tropical development, there is a small chance we could get a little tropical depression or a weak tropical storm to form. Now, will it be a major hurricane? Probably not. It's not that it's impossible for that to happen in June, but I would consider it to be very unlikely at this point right now. But my main point here is just to say that this region over here is something to pay close attention to as we go through those first few weeks here. Most times when we have anything develop historically in the month of June, or really the months of June and July, they tend to form close to home. So something to keep watch of as we continue to move along here. So, one other thing we're going to talk about, and I mentioned it earlier in the video, is I always like to look at some analogs here as we get into the new month here. So, I was doing a little bit of digging around, and I kind of compare June maybe to this June, July, August time frame here in 2003 and 2004. And I found some interesting parallels. There was a severe weather event that did occur back in 2003 that was over towards the northern plains. If we go back a couple frames over here, look at this feature right here that pops up towards the middle part of the month. I'm not saying that that's exactly what could happen, but it's something that I have taken note of, though. So if you're over here towards the Dakotas in particular, could need to be on the, you may want to be on the lookout for maybe increased severe weather potential going forward. Then also, there's a chance that we could get a named storm or two. There's going to be one that's off the eastern Pacific possibly as well that we'll need to watch going forward as well as one off towards the Atlantic, particularly towards the Gulf Coast. 2003 was also a year where we had a couple of named storms. Didn't do a whole lot in the way of damage, but they were pesky storms, caused their flooding, did their usual thing. So, a couple interesting parallels that I thought I would make note of going forward here. So, that being said, I'm not going to take too much more of your time here. I appreciate you all tuning in and watching this video. Make sure you guys hit that like button and that subscribe button. We'll have one more outlook for this upcoming month next week. Well, precisely 1 week from today. And then, of course, we have the hurricane season outlook. And then 1 week from then, we'll be going into pretty much tropical outlook mode from that point onward. Still, of course, we'll be covering severe weather, but we'll be keeping the content rolling here. But until then, thank you for your time, and I'll see you next time.